So, you're mapping out your financial future, and you hit that classic crossroads pretty much every Indian investor faces when planning for retirement. Do you play it completely safe, or do you chase that market-linked growth? I mean, you've got that one friend passionately swearing by PPF and another one telling you you're crazy for not going all in on NPS. It is the ultimate retirement dilemma.
Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're diving deep into the source material to systematically break down the National Pension System and the Public Provident Fund. We're going to clear up the noise once and for all and figure out exactly how they actually fit into your specific financial goals.
Here's our game plan for today. We'll start with the dilemma itself, formally meet our two contenders, tackle risk versus reward, navigate the maze of taxes and withdrawals, and finally, bring it all together to build your ultimate retirement portfolio.
All right, let's jump straight into Section 1, the retirement dilemma. Look, the confusion here is totally understandable, but it really boils down to their fundamental DNA. We are literally comparing apples and oranges. One is a highly predictable, government-backed small savings instrument, and the other, well, that's a dynamic market-linked retirement system. So instead of asking which one is just flat out better, we really need to be asking which one is better suited to your specific timelines and your specific goals.
Moving right along to Section 2, let's officially meet PPF and NPS. First up in the ring, we've got the Public Provident Fund, or PPF. You can think of this as your absolute bedrock of stability. It offers a government-notified interest rate, which is currently sitting at a super reliable 7.1% per annum, compounded yearly. It's basically the perfect cocktail of long-term saving, absolute government backing, and, as we'll talk about in a bit, some seriously fantastic tax benefits. On the flip side, we have the National Pension System, or NPS. Regulated by the PFRDA, which is the government body overseeing pensions, this system takes your hard-earned money and allocates it across varied market-linked asset classes. We're talking equity, corporate bonds, government securities, even alternative assets. Its whole purpose is to actively build a retirement corpus and a pension stream. Because of that, its returns aren't fixed at all. They depend entirely on how those underlying markets actually perform.
Now that we know who we're dealing with, let's step onto the real battleground in Section 3, risk versus reward. Now, this is where things get really interesting, because the risk profiles here are practically night and day. PPF shields you completely from equity market volatility. For a conservative investor, having that zero volatility guarantee is incredibly comforting. You can sleep soundly at night. NPS, however, will fluctuate with the markets. If you've got equity in your allocation, your corpus might take a temporary hit during a market correction. But over a multi-decade horizon, that exact same equity exposure inherently offers the potential for much, much higher long-term growth. And you know, this brings us to the absolute biggest mistake I see investors make. You literally cannot look at a single year of market-linked returns from an NPS portfolio, compare it to a fixed interest instrument like PPF, and just declare a winner. That completely misses the point. You've got to evaluate them based on your full time horizon, your personal risk tolerance, and realistically, what you expect inflation to do to your money over the next 20 or 30 years.
Let's move to Section 4, taxes and withdrawals. Because let's be real, keeping more of your own money is just as important as growing it in the first place.
Under Section 80C of the Income Tax Act, your PPF contributions can qualify for a tax deduction of up to 1.5 lakh rupees every single financial year. And here is the absolute best part, the magic trick really. The interest you earn on that money, plus the final maturity amount, is completely tax-free. It's that classic exempt status that makes it a massive advantage for your core savings.
But hold on, because NPS steps up the tax game in a major way. It offers this exclusive additional deduction of up to 50,000 rupees under Section 80CCD 1B, and that is completely over and above the standard 1.5 lakh limit. If you're a salaried employee, especially if your employer is also pitching in under Section 80CCD 2, NPS becomes an absolute powerhouse for tax efficiency.
Now, a huge word of caution here. Before you just start throwing money into these accounts purely to save on taxes, you absolutely must verify your specific tax regime. A lot of people blindly assume the deductions work the exact same way under both the old and new tax regimes. Actually, scratch that. They don't. The rules differ significantly. So please always check what you're actually eligible for before you lock your cash away.
Speaking of locking your money away, let's talk about liquidity. Both of these instruments are really designed for the long haul. PPF matures in 15 years, though it's super convenient to extend it in 5-year blocks. And it does allow for some loans and partial withdrawals along the way if you're in a pinch. NPS, on the other hand, is way stricter. It essentially traps your funds within a very rigid, retirement-oriented framework.
Let's fast forward to when you finally reach retirement age. Thanks to recent amendments by the PFRDA for the all-citizen model kicking in for July 2026, a normal exit at age 60 now allows you to take up to 80% of your corpus as a lump sum. The remaining 20% has to go towards purchasing an annuity, which is basically just a guaranteed monthly paycheck to give you a regular pension. This is a huge positive shift from the older rules and gives retirees a lot more flexibility.
But what if, life happens? What if you absolutely need to access your NPS funds prematurely, way before you hit that normal exit age?
Well, an early exit basically flips that entire structure on its head. If you leave early, you're generally forced to put at least 80% of your hard-earned corpus into an annuity, leaving you with only 20% as a lump sum. This proves, without a shadow of a doubt, that NPS is fundamentally built to protect your retirement. It is absolutely not meant to be used as a flexible, short-term savings account.
Which brings us to our final act, Section 5, the ultimate retirement portfolio. This is where theory meets practice.
Let's put this into the real world. Think about two totally different investors. First, we have someone conservative who loses sleep over market dips. They value capital stability above all else, so naturally, they're going to lean heavily on PPF. Then we have a 30-year-old growth-oriented investor with decades to ride out the market waves. They can intelligently leverage the market-linked equity side of NFPS to ensure their wealth actually outpaces inflation over those 30 years.
When you lay it all out side by side like this, the stark contrast is obvious. From their core nature and returns, to their contribution limits, tax rules, and that major annuity requirement at the end, it's clear they aren't competing products at all. They serve entirely different, highly specialized purposes in a well-rounded financial plan.
So how do we actually do this? Just follow this simple, actionable 6-step framework. 1. Build your emergency fund. 2. Get adequate insurance. Please, never use your retirement funds for a random emergency. 3. Decide on your actual retirement goal. 4. Figure out your ideal asset allocation. Only then, at step 5, do you seamlessly deploy NPS and PPF into your portfolio based on what you need them to do. And finally, step 6, just review your plan periodically to stay on track.
At the end of the day, it was never really a head-to-head battle where one has to lose. For most of us trying to build a robust future, the most powerful strategy is actually an alliance. It's NPS and PPF working together. You use PPF for your rock-solid foundation, and you let NPS run as your long-term growth engine.
So I'll leave you with this final thought. Based on your own risk appetite, how are you going to combine the unshakable stability of PPF and the pure growth potential of NPS to conquer your retirement goals? Are you letting fear rob you of growth, or is a chase for returns leaving your foundation cracked? Think about your allocation today and start building that unbreakable portfolio. Thanks for joining me on this explainer, and I'll see you next time.